Welcome to another episode of Mystic Skeptic Radio. We are happy to have Mr. Nick Matau. He is describes himself as a non-Jew U.S. veteran, pro-Israel TikTok warrior, and Torah believer. And he has faced backlash from many people online due to his views. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our show and how the format of what we do. So, in the last couple of months, we've had a lot of conservative guests sharing their talking points or perspective, and it's a very progressive station. And some of the shows before ours, all they do is beat up on conservatives and the state of Israel and all these things. So, what we try to do is to try to look at it from the lens of anti-Semitism. And I know political anti-Semitism has been growing from both sides, as you have mentioned in a lot of interviews. But as a fellow Torah believer, I have to kind of gauge the conversation because I am politically aggressive, and I'm worried about the impression of all people, not just Jews. So as we go through our conversation, there might be a little pushback or questions that come up, but it's for the sake of understanding, the sake of collaboration, and for us to be able to understand each other. The one thing that I struggle with is that everybody's siloed and doing confirmation bias, so we don't even get to see what the other side thinks, and we don't get to learn from other people. So I hope that works
Sure.
for you, and I hope we can have a lively conversation.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
So tell us about your background. I know that you've shared about in one of the interviews you mentioned that you grew up Catholic. Is that true?
Well, I was a cradle Catholic. I would say I grew up more partially Catholic, partially just kind of non-denominational Christian when I kind of stepped away from the Catholic Church and just consider myself a Christian. I didn't grow up really around Jews or Muslims. So honestly, I was not that I didn't know Jews or Muslims existed. It's just not something that was around me. So when I consider myself to have some questions with the Catholic Church, I just said, okay, I just consider myself Christian."
Well, it's interesting that I did a whole presentation at a conference about how the same people who were blaming Jews for putting kids in matzah and persecuting crypto Jews or anusim are the people who are now rising to the top of the the Christian right, and they have the same conspiracies, the same hatred. Um, they even contradict themselves. They say that we're not the real Jews when it comes down to Israel, but we are the descendants of the Jews that killed Jesus. They do a lot of crazy things, and since people are so ignorant or uneducated about the subject, they just go right along to believe these lies. So, what made you start considering that the Jews, the Jewish state, the fight against anti-Semitism was important in your um, outreach or you getting involved in the media space?
I mean, it was really about 5 years ago when the Hamas launched that about 5,000 rockets, May of 2021. I made a kind of quick video. I was already talking about conservative politics, contemporary news on TikTok, gaining much bigger following than I do talking about Israel, to be honest. But I made a quick video calling out virtue signaling of people who changed their bio overnight, really, from Black Lives Matter to Free Palestine. Now that they added Free Palestine and they actually like erased BLM and just put Free Palestine. And so it was a significant enough portion that did that on social media that I made a video calling that out. I wouldn't even particularly say it was necessarily a pro-Israel video, although I was pro-Israel even at the time. And I went to bed and I woke up the next day and it was a lot of comments. 70% of them I'd say were pretty hateful. And of that 70%, about 90% or so were just straight anti-Semitism because I think they just thought I was a Jew. And it was just a lot of, I hope Hitler comes back and gasses you, stuff like that, comments like that. And so I kind of was a little awakened by how much anti-Semitism did exist. I didn't realize it was that bad. Obviously, I knew it existed. But once people thought I was Jewish, then it showed a little bit more than I was clearly ignorant to it. So I naturally kind of just respond back. It's not like I went all in the next day. I just kind of respond back. People would question stuff about Israel. I already knew more than the average American, but I started to read more and more and started to study more and more. And honestly, I'd been doing it every single day since that moment.
So the one thing that had made me lose a lot of friends online, and I have a group called Jews and Christians Combating Anti-Semitism,
Hmm.
was there was an Israeli professor, and she was talking about JFK and something related to the civil rights movement or something like that, and she mentioned that the quote from JFK that says, if you don't allow for people to have peaceful revolution, you are encouraging violent revolution. So what I was saying, and it got taken out of context, and a lot of my Jewish friends, overreacted, was that if we don't allow for a platform or an opportunity for people to share their grievances, let's say that there is some injustice going on in the Middle East or in the US or whatever, and you keep dismissing them and you keep saying whatever, you guys don't know what you're talking about, police brutality is not that bad or whatever, then next thing you know, they start aligning with terrorists. They start aligning with people who want to take down the democratic system, and they want to go into communism, socialism. And where I saw that growing up in Mexico was that we had a group of people, indigenous people, who wanted to become independent, the Zapatistas, and a lot of famous people, musicians, were supporting them. And because they never got any traction, and they started being attacked by the military over there, they started making associations with the communists in Cuba, with the socialists in South America. And the next group that they became friends with was the ETA, which is a terrorist group, a separatist from Spain. So you start seeing that these people who want to be independent or separate, next thing you know, they want to become friends with Hamas. They want to become friends with Islamic Jihad and Hezbollah. So, what do you think is the right opportunity for people who have issues with the U.S. being imperialistic at times, or with the state of Israel being too militaristic, or at times being too aggressive? What is the right route for them to take if they have an issue with what's going on? What diplomatic means, or what type of, um, you know, protesting is okay as compared to BLM or the pro-Palestinian groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a point to bring up in some cases. It's the full quote of JFK. I'm familiar. Is those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. And so I think there's a key distinction to understand the idea of impossible, right? Not just those who reject peaceful revolution. Peaceful revolution, just because you come off as peaceful doesn't mean your cause is either righteous or, more importantly, is even justifiable even in the modern sense. Sometimes you can even say something's righteous, but it's not based in reality. There's a lot of things I'm sure that we want in reality that doesn't make it necessarily so. What I will say though is that I want to highlight the distinction between making peaceful revolution impossible and if you, how do I say this? If we are comparing this to Israel, like if somebody has the case saying, well, what Israel does to the Palestinian, the Arabs, is they are rejecting peaceful revolution. Again, that doesn't mean you have the right to do terrorism. And even if you think that is where you're naturally going to head, that doesn't mean you're not going to be faced with those consequences. And I'm going to expand on two things. One, specifically because peaceful revolution has not been impossible for the Palestinians. Even before the state of Israel, when you go back to the Peel Commission in 1937, when you go back to the League of Nations mandate, and even before that, during the Ottoman times, the economic booms that were happening in certain areas from the first Aliyah of 1881 and on. And so this idea that peaceful revolution has just been impossible, so they must join Hamas or PIJ, I wholeheartedly reject that. However, if that's still your argument, the second point I want to bring up is when people used to do revolutions before by, let's say, breaking the law because the law was unjust, the whole point behind it was you look at the civil rights movement with the black community. They purposely would get arrested and they were happy to Were they breaking the law the way it was written? Literally, yes, but that was the point, was that the statement itself was self-evident to say that the law is so unjust that I am willing to take the arrest. And I don't even want bail, by the way. That was also a strategy to overwhelm the justice system. But they will take the punishment and they'll be happy to because the statement is now self-evident that the law is so unjust that we are going to take the consequences of it and then let the court of public opinion decide if that is righteous or not. No matter what somebody says, the court of public opinion is actually pretty important. Should it be? Maybe not, maybe so, but it is. When you decide to utilize terrorism by calling it freedom fighters, resistance, whatever you want to call it, and yet you also criticize any consequences of your actions with that, I reject that wholeheartedly. It is a form, it's like the cousin of virtue signaling, in my opinion. And it's this idea that you want to lead some kind of resistance because you find it to be so important, but not really important enough to actually deal with any consequences that may come your way, and to allow the people to see those consequences and determine for themselves if your cause is not just righteous, but based in reality. And so, I hear your question, and I think it's a great quote by JFK, but I reject that this applies to the Palestinian Arabs.
Well, and I appreciate the distinction that you make because in my research regarding the subject, you see a lot of idealization, romanticizing of different groups, and I think it happens also with the Israelis, and it's almost like the founding fathers of the U.S., where if you focus on the negative, you're never going to get out of it because you can bring up all the issues that historically we find problematic. And the same could be like what was going on in the 1940s. We're applying modern day standards, but people apply even not even modern day standards. They apply almost like a biblical purity a test, where it's like, well, if you are like Jesus, you would never kill anybody under any circumstances because Jesus was all love. So then they say, well, since the Jews are related to Jesus, they should act like him. Or the Christians who support the Palestinians, uh, it's okay for the Palestinians to fight back, even though we don't want the Jews to fight back. Like they come up with all these kind of weird justifications for everything, and they're not consistent. Like you were saying, the civil rights movement was consistent. They believed that what they were doing was social gospel. It's like we're gonna follow through with a godly perspective that is gonna be completely righteous, even in the eyes of people who might not like us. I had a lot of problems with BLM because they were using, there was different camps, and I don't like when the conservatives try to paint them all with the same brush. But the the idea that people deserve dignity was a great idea, but then they started going into Marxist ideology where we don't even need police, we don't even need to follow any type of democratic means to get to the ends. We're just gonna tear it all down. So it was almost like a Joker-like mentality, where it's like the thing has been so corrupt so long, we just need to burn it all down. And how do you expect for anybody to join you when your solution is so radical that is destructive? And I think that's why very easily a lot of people like were like, wait, whoa, 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 we didn't know it was going this way. And I haven't seen on the pro-Palestinian side that type of ability to measure themselves and say, well, we tried divestment and sanctions, and that didn't work. So now we're going to try this other thing, or we're going to gather all the religious people and have all the religious people speak out against the assault on Gaza. Instead, they're doing kind of like Steve Bannon approach, where we're just going to bombard people with all kinds of propaganda, um, very melodramatic things. We're going to show them all these, how evil the Jews are. And we're going to blast the internet with tons of stuff. And hopefully one of them will stick. And it's like, if you had like a Nelson Mandela, or you had a Desmond Tutu or something like that within the Palestinian movement, you would have way more respect and way more credibility. But instead, now you're like, you have pro Hamas, pro Islamism, pro communism. You have all these different groups coming together, and they're like bombarding against the conservative movement. Is that what you've been facing in backlash? Like you're getting people from Bahrain and people from Indonesia, people all over attacking you left and right, and you don't know what's bots and what's real. Is that something you've been experiencing?
Yeah, I mean it's. I think every major movement that you see, whether we're talking about BLM or the pro-Palestinian movement, this isn't coming from like necessarily a conspiracy place. I believe that there are some talks and some protests that people want to have, and it's popular. I'm just saying that it's always boosted even more, regardless of it's this much or anything in between, by people that like to hijack the movements and they turn them into a popularity, trendy type movements. I saw the Black Lives Matter protests. I was there in Hawaii specifically, and also in California. I mean, I was literally in the protests just to see what was going on, reporting on some of the situation. I was at the pro-Pali protests, pretending to be pro-Palestinian. I went to the UCLA encampments with my good friend Cam Higby. He's an independent reporter, pretty popular, especially on X and YouTube. And me and him were one of the first to go into the encampments at UCLA. They were not letting in anyone who was pro-Israeli, Jewish. They were not letting in reporters that weren't part of their group. So I was able to convince them that I was pro-Palestinian, and then I got Cam in. We both covered our faces with keffiyehs, and we go in, and the entire place is tagged up with communist symbols, Marxist stickers, pamphlets, books, ACAB, destruction of property. That I mean, this is UCLA. These were buildings that were older than any of us that have been alive. Um, one of the buildings, and so it was the exact same stuff I saw at the BLM protests. I didn't see any BLM riots. The ones I was at was legitimately just protests, but same exact pamphlets, very similar symbols and ideology. So it's interesting. You always see these kind of mostly left-wing protests that are very big and trendy, and they always have those mixed in with it. ACAB, Marxism, communism. I don't think that's a coincidence. Of course, I do believe there's some people that are legitimately at that protest because they care about that cause, whether it be BLM, pro-Palestinian movement, whatever the case might be. I'm simply saying the people that are in charge of passing out the stuff. When I went to the UCLA, I went to UC Berkeley as well. They handed me, because they thought I was a pro-Palestinian, a tarp and a tent for free. There was food for free. And I'm not talking about just like little crackers. I mean, piles of food. They had their own security at the UCLA. I thought the security was put in because I was told the university paid for it. I was like, oh, it's probably to keep both sides separated so there's no violence. No, it wasn't. I found out the security was paid for by the university and it was solely for the pro-Palestinian side. Why is the university paying for that? And who's paying the university to do that? Like, I can understand the university coming out and saying, we're going to stay neutral in the situation and we're going to hire security to kind of just maintain, security overall. But no, they're paying for the pro-Palestinians security. I find that interesting. I couldn't get an answer on who paid for it. So I started asking around, seeing if there was like maybe a GoFundMe where they all chipped in and then they used that money. Nope, nobody. Everyone said no. I didn't pay a dime for this. I just showed up. Most of the people there, by the way, weren't even students. So that's interesting. So to answer your question, yes, I do get attacked from both sides, mostly left wing. But yes, of course, there is this far right, white nationalist type movement. I know earlier you said Christian right. I wouldn't particularly call them Christian right. I think they're far right. There are a lot of Christians who are right wing that are very big supporters of Israel. In fact, they're probably demographically the biggest supporters of Israel. But yeah, there is a far right movement that is absolutely proving the horseshoe theory correct. And you have just today Candace Owens, who I don't consider right wing at all. I think she's very much always been a leftist who uses her platform, and she is a chameleon and she will shift how she needs to. And in some years, she was a right winger. Funny enough, she becomes a right winger a day after the left wing rejects her because she started a website that was a doxing website effectively, and the left wing told her she's crazy and they rejected her. And then magically, like overnight almost, she magically just becomes this right winger. And now she's going right back to leftist ideology. she's on Today on X with Anna Kasparian saying, "Oh, I can't wait. You should be on my show." And it's like you got Anna Kasparian, this like super left wing, just like tokenized Armenian who works for the Young Turks, the group that was heavily responsible for the genocide of her people. And she's like such a tokenized person that she feels the need to defend that and say that's not what he means by it. And then you have Candace Owens, who's a right winger, and they're just connecting. Why? It's not because they agree on abortion. I'm sure they don't. I don't know. I actually don't know what Candace Owens will say. I haven't heard her speak about right wing politics in months, so I have no idea what her views are now. But I know they agree on anti-Semitism, that they're both anti-Semites.
We could talk about the popular anti-Semites in a minute, but have you ever been involved with like a student union like board or anything like that? Because when I was part of the student union at my school, if the organization's mission was we're going to be protesting or we're going to be pro Israel, pro Palestine, or pro Christian or whatever, the school had to give them money. So they say, hey, we're going to go to this conference, and we would give like $3,000 for 5 kids to go to a conference. And I was like, why am I paying for these people? Do you think that the universities have become so liberal that if there's five pro-Palestine organizations and they say, hey, we're going to throw this huge protest, send some catering, send some security. It is part of our mission to stand for Palestine. That these super wealthy schools, and they also have a lot of white guilt, they would just say, okay, here's, 10,000 bucks. You guys do your thing, and
Why?
as long as everybody's happy.
Yeah, I think it's
What do you think?
undeniable that the university systems have become a left-wing cesspool. I grew up relatively more left-wing, never really like a leftist, but center left. I'm from California. I think a lot of people are from California just naturally grow up that way because we are kind of taught early on. It wasn't until college I started questioning things that I became definitely more right-wing. But nonetheless, I think, of course, the university systems have been. I don't care who you are. You can be a left wing, right wing. You could have voted for Trump, voted for Kamala. I don't care. If you deny that, you're just not in touch with reality. It has become a left wing cesspool. It is very clear. Um, are you there still?
Yeah, sorry, I lost you for a minute.
Oh, there we go.
So the
What's the last thing you heard?
Californians are usually very supportive of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. The just growing up
You
in
said people in
California.
California.
Okay, yeah, growing up in California, you generally are going to see you're going to grow up a little bit more left wing generally, not all the time, but generally. It wasn't until college I became more right wing, but I was saying I don't care if you voted for Trump, Kamala, I don't care if you're left wing, right wing. If you cannot admit that the university system has been infiltrated by leftists, it's a leftist cesspool today. You're just not in touch with reality. You're being dishonest with yourself. It's also very clear that it's been infiltrated by Qatar is a very big one, but not just Qatar. There's others, but Qatar is the biggest one by far. You can cut Qatari funding into our university system in half, and it would still be by far the biggest. They have spent on average 200, about $50 million a year per year for the past 20 years, and it's actually gone higher. That's the average over 20 years. Last year, I think it was 700 million, give or take. And for those that are saying, oh, that could just be funding for partnership, is that you don't have proof that they did a study actually, years ago, but they did a study and found that colleges that had funding from Middle Eastern countries, specifically Qatar, or unknown countries, right, but known from the Middle East, so essentially most likely Qatar, because again, they're the biggest. They found that those colleges had a 300% increase in anti-Semitic attacks than colleges that didn't take funding from Qatar. That is not a coincidence, and that's the average across the board. That's not like they just tested one school and it's just a coincidence that that one school had anti-Semitic attacks. It was schools that took funding from Qatar or Middle Eastern countries had 300% more anti-Semitic attacks than those that did not.
So, speaking of provocateurs and people who are creating, you know, for a while, Christians felt like they were being attacked, and a lot of it had to do. We just did a show about how Christians felt that the the woke, the DEI, the leftist perspective, which started becoming kind of fascist in the sense of you can't think differently, you can pursue perspectives that are not popular, that they were being maligned and mistreated, and they were becoming a minority in the U.S. And then after October 7th, the Jewish people started feeling in that way. And it just happens that Trump has a lot of funders and that his daughter is Jewish and he has a good relationship with Netanyahu or whatever. And now they want to have a place in the table as well, and they want to be protected. Do you think that there's any legitimacy for people saying, well, you guys are doing the same thing that the Democrats were doing with having special interests being more emphasized. Because Jimmy Dore, I don't know if you're familiar with him, he says the same thing that we were fighting, where they're making trans and maybe Arabs and black people like a protected status. Now they're doing that for Jews. And they never talk about Christians for some reason, because they have a lot of Christians that support leftist perspectives. Do you think that there is any legitimacy with the idea that no group should ever be favored? That if we're gonna support and protect all of them, we should just do it for all, and that this overemphasis on uh, Jewish or Israeli concerns causes people to be leery of too much involvement from that particular foreign country. I know they don't care about Qatar or anybody else. They overemphasize Israel, but is there any grounds for people saying that there's too much pro-Israel and pro-Jewish fears and overprotection?
I think 95% of it is over exaggerated from them because they take general civil rights that actually do apply to all people or all religions, ethnicities, which Jews happen to be an ethno religion, so it falls into both groups, but nonetheless, you get my point. And they exaggerate it and try to pretend like it's some kind of special requirement that's only applied to Jews and nobody else. In reality, when you look into it, that's not particularly true. However, I think there's some cases where there's some pro-Israelis that try to advocate for maybe a special protection. I think their heart's in the right place, and I can totally understand because naturally there is a overrepresentation of anti-Semitic attacks. They make up 2% of America, if we're talking about worldwide, 0.2% of the world's population, and yet they are significantly higher anti-Semitic attacks, whether it be just violence or harassment, way more percentage-wise than any other religious group for sure. And in a lot of cases, even ethnic groups, some cases they're still in the top like three. And so I think their heart's in the right place. However, I don't particularly, now I'm speaking as a non-Jew, so take this with a grain of salt. It's really not my place to say, but since you asked me the question, I'll answer. I don't particularly want to see any kind of special status or requirements for Jews. I think the Jews are and have been a light amongst the nations since the very beginning. And I think that the Jewish people have something special in them that others do not have. I am a Bible believing, I believe in the God of Abraham. I believe in the Hebrew Bible. However, even putting the Bible aside and religion aside, just looking historically, the Jewish people have something very special, and I think it is the Torah. Now, before you say, okay, what do you mean? You said put religion aside and you mentioned the Torah. What I mean is that the Torah has affected Jewish culture for an extreme in an extremely positive way that goes beyond just religion. The Torah affects every Jew. I don't care if they're an atheist, they don't even believe in God, they're 100% sure God doesn't exist, or if they're your Chabad rabbi or anyone in between in terms of their observance level. The Torah is in every Jew. Um, and the idea of wrestling with not just God, Israel means to wrestle with God. I mean, just wrestling with everything, questioning things, education, that desire. And of course, persecution also drives people. There's two ways that persecution can drive a people. It can drive them into an extreme victimhood where it has a perpetual, like just downward trend, or sometimes it drives people into doing even greater things. Now, obviously, that's a sad thing to say because it's not like I'll say, hey, so you can keep being great. I hope you keep getting persecuted. It's just a fact of the matter that that sometimes is what happens to persecuted people. It's not that I'm advocating for people to be persecuted. But the Jewish people obviously were the latter. They even just generations after the Shoah, the Holocaust, one of the worst atrocities, definitely in modern history, they create a state, and that state grows to be one of the most recognized states with one of the most, especially for its size, greatest inventions in world history. And so, to draw it back to the original question, I don't particularly want to see the Jews have like a similar Black Lives Matter style type movement. I'm with you. I don't like when conservatives particularly try to assume that all people that were pro BLM were automatically like just bad people. Of course not. The leadership was awful, obviously. But of course, there's a lot of people that had a good heart that were part of any protest for that matter. Um, but I don't really see it with the Jewish people. The Jewish people are not victims and they never really have been. And I'm not particularly saying that other groups of people have been victims. I just think it's different. Everyone has gone through their own types of persecution. I would never compare slavery, for example, that blacks had to go through in America. I wouldn't compare that to the Holocaust. I wouldn't compare the Holocaust. We shouldn't compare persecutions. We shouldn't compare atrocities. The point is that it is different for every group of people, and that group of people's culture is going to be different, which means they are going to react to persecution differently. For the Jewish people, I don't want them to mimic some kind of other thing that we saw that may or may not have been successful for one group. I don't see it being successful for the Jewish people. Of course, I hate anti-Semitism. I hate the persecution of the Jewish people. However, again, the Jewish people have always been a light amongst the nations. I want them to continue to do that. And I don't see that happening by giving them some kind of special status and having some kind of like hand holding, if you will.
So in one of your TikToks or Instagrams, you're wearing the Jewish keffiyeh. A while back they designed that, and it
The what?
has keffiyeh. The
The
wrap,
Sudra.
but it's Jewish, and it has Stars of David. It
Sudra.
has Hebrew on it. Um,
Yeah, it's called a
and
Sudra.
and why stop there? Why not get a delete? And what's if you don't mind getting personal, if you do believe in the Torah and you have a connection with the God of Abraham, where are you in your spiritual path in connection to the Jewish faith as a way of worship and a way of connecting to the divine?
Sure. So first off, I want to say it's yeah, it's called a Sudra, not definitely not a Jewish kafia. The kafia is a wrap that actually comes from Iraq, from a town called Kufa. The Palestinians kind of stole that in the 1936 Arab revolt. But yeah, the Jews have been wearing what's called the Sudra. They've been wearing that for thousands of years. It dates back way before the Palestinians hijacked what that was. To answer your question, wearing that in my TikTok. I don't know which TikTok I was wearing that in. I do have it because I support. It comes from my buddy Rudy Rockman. He's pretty famous. I don't know if you know him. He sells these. I supported his business. I don't particularly really wear that around. But yeah, sometimes I have put it on to show us support. To answer your question, why wouldn't I put on a tallit or like tefillin or something? Well, because I'm not Jewish. It's not a mitzvot for me. If I ever converted to Judaism, then of course I would. But I am not here to cosplay as Jewish people. I think their culture and their beliefs and a lot of the clothing that the religious community and Judaism wears is beautiful, but it's just not for me. And um, I've I have considered conversion to Judaism. It's just something that I wait for God to put into my life. I really don't feel any need to force it. The Jewish people have given me nothing but love. I've never felt like an other to them. I know a lot of the anti-Israel and anti-Jewish people will love to tell me that they hate me because I'm a goy. It's funny how they're the only ones that say that to me. I've never had any Jewish person give me hate. I've had Jewish people disagree with me, and that's fine. fact, I love that. I don't think you can ever get too many Jews agreeing on one thing. They always love to argue, but I've never had a Jewish person particularly give me hate. So yeah, I mean, I find it beautiful, and but I don't feel the need to convert. Um, Again, if that's something that God puts in my life, then God puts it in my life, and I will make sure to keep my heart open to anything God puts in my life, regardless of what it is. But for now, my defense of the Jewish people and my soul that very much is connected to this topic and this mission and even Jerusalem. When I'm in Jerusalem, I feel something completely different. I don't know what it is. That could be a calling of, my soul to be called to conversion into the Jewish tribe. And that might be it. I'm not sure. It also very much could just be that I care a lot about this subject. I guess time will tell, but I'm not in a rush. My mission is still very much um, going to be exactly the same, regardless if I ever converted to Judaism or if I just stayed myself right now.
And for those who are not familiar, the guy who designed the style of Sudra, I have one of them. He's a Yemenite Jew, and he shows in pictures that they wore those. And there's like different kinds. The reason that I connected with the keffiyeh is because in the pictures, he has Jews wearing some type of garment, and then there's Muslims and Bedouins. They're all wearing different garments that are similar. And then you see
Okay,
them in Saudi Arabia and other places. They all have different checkered stuff on them.
sure.
Um, but when Huckabee and now Doug Wilson were, I don't even know what to call it. They were ambushed by Tucker Carlson about why care about Israel and why are the Jews even there and who's a real Levantine person and all that stuff. It was such a cheap shot interviews where Tucker just took over and he was saying a lot of Qatari and other type of propaganda to try to dismiss the Jewish people as even legitimate. And to me, those type of low blows are disgusting because um, there are secular Israelis that do that. They say, "Well, we lost the connection," or even though people were coming and going or whatever, who cares? Let's just give up, kind of thing. So the Susa says that the state of Israel is legitimate for historical war and treaty reasons. What would be the thing for you to express a desire to support the state of Israel? Because what I would say is that you can support an idea, you can support a country, but you don't have to support the current government. And I think the same
Sure.
goes with the U.S. Um, I think one of the criticisms of Zionists is that they make it where you just have to support everything. That you can't have like a your own unique perspective on the topic. For you, what are the major points that make you go all in with the current Zionist agenda versus a nuanced approach based on historical and political concerns?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, you're right. There's a lot of people that try to say, "Oh, Zionists think you have to just like love everything." It's weird because you know who doesn't say that are other Zionists. I mean, maybe there's some, but no one I know. In fact, nobody criticizes the government more than Israelis do. Um, but to answer your question, I don't particularly believe that I'm following Zionism today. Yeah, I think colloquially we say I say I'm a Zionist because colloquially it just kind of means, yeah, I'm pro-Israel. I believe in Israel. But like in reality, Zionism is complete. Zionism's done. The state exists. Um Obviously I have my beliefs in what Israel should do for the future. To put it bluntly, I'm pro one state solution. I believe it should be Israel from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Um I I'm unapologetic about that. But again, Zionism, it's like what exactly is a Zionist? You know, when you go into Israel, they don't really use that word a lot. I know a lot of people that born and raised still to this day live in Israel, and they're like, I didn't even know what that word really was. Zionist, like it was more of an historical term. It's something that people utilize today. Um, with Tucker Carlson and Mike Huckabee. it's interesting they talk about like this idea of DNA and blood quantums, which is very Nazi-esque. Like that's what the Nazis did was blood quantums. The Jewish people are not a blood thing. It's a tribe of people. And that tribe requires a continued identity on a personal level and as a tribe level. For example, if I took a DNA test right now and it came back and let's say it said 5% Jewish, 10% Jewish, whatever, would I be more Jewish than I was before I knew that DNA test? No. I still would tell people I'm not Jewish. Oh, but Nick, you got 10%. So what? The Jewish people are a tribe of people. It's not a religion. It's not even just particularly just an ethnicity. It's a tribe. It's a nation. And so, I don't understand Tucker's like upset. Well, I know why he has this obsession with like, why don't you just do this DNA test? DNA test. I mean, if you do, you're going to find. There's been plenty of DNA tests. Professor Reich from Harvard. He did DNA testing for a lot of the ancient world in India near the Indus River, and including the Jewish people separately, Ashkenazi, Sephardic, and Mizrahi. And even with the Ashkenazi, who he saw some admixture with Southern European, saw significant Levantine DNA, saw the same thing with Sephardic, except the admixture was more Northern African and Southern European. And you saw the same with the Mizrahis. There was some admixture with the surrounding nations, but all of them had Levantine DNA. They had haplogroups that were very unique that you see in a Kohanim, somebody who is a Mizrahi Jew, just as much as you see someone who was a Steinberg and from Poland or Latvia. You saw the same exact haplogroups. It's very clear. So really, Tucker's point's ridiculous. They've done these DNA tests. They found 4 women that all link back to the Middle East that are in, I want to say it was 40% of all Ashkenazi Jews, even. I say Ashkenazi Jews because for some reason they're the ones that are poked at the most. Very rarely do people kind of poke at Mizrahi Jews or Sephardic Jews. They always poke at, and it's not even like just Ashkenazi Jews. It's always specifically Poland. I don't know what it is. It's funny because when the Jews went into the diaspora after the Roman exile, a lot of them actually went to Italy and Southern Europe. Poland is actually kind of a more relatively recent thing in terms of the 2,000 plus year diaspora, but that's neither here nor there. I'm rambling at this point. My point is that they're a tribe of people. To answer your question about like Zionism, how I see it, my concern is to get rid of this status quo ideology that safe people find as a safeguard approach. And what I mean, to be more blunt, is this idea of a two-state solution. We tried it. And look, I get it. There's even a lot of Zionists who are pro two-state solution, but I'm being blunt. We tried this. The Oslo Accords were a failure. I don't care who you are. I don't think anyone can deny that. I think that's the one thing everyone can agree on. And it was attempted. It failed. A two-state solution is really nothing more than a three-state solution, in my opinion, because not really my opinion. I mean, it's based in fact. 1921, the British create the Emirate of Transjordan. They kick out Jews that legally own land there, and they stop all migration of Jews. 1946, Jordan declares its independence. 1949, they illegally annexed Judea and Samaria. Like international law says they illegally annexed it. 1950, it was administrative. And then you have Jordan, who loses in 1967, relinquishes in 1988. And then, of course, that leads into the Oslo 1 of 93, Oslo 2 of 95. Where I'm getting at is that Jordan was created as an Arab state just because they decided not to name it Palestine and they called it Jordan, which is ironic because that comes from a Hebrew word. That doesn't mean it wasn't 78% of what they considered Palestine in 1917, after the Battle of Jerusalem between the British and the Ottomans. So why is there no free Palestine movement today in Jordan? They took your land, the majority of it, by the way. It's not even like I'm talking about some sliver. The majority of your land they took. They persecute the Palestinian people today. A lot of them still to this day can't even get citizenships in Jordan. They're kept in camps. They're separated. They're not allowed to hold all positions or jobs. Um, I'm just confused. And it's not like they had a good history either. It's not like you say, well, Jordan and Palestine. No, Black September, 1970s. I mean, they have fought each other. They killed, their king and attempted the prime minister. It's insane that there is no thought. And I know why. It's because there's no Jews, so there's no news. Um, yeah, sorry, I'm rambling, but I just find it insane.
So what is Israel going to do with 4 million self-proclaimed Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank when they
Yeah,
become the
so
one Israel?
my idea is I have no interest, and I think that there needs to be a solution of how to move forward. I have no interest whatsoever in this idea that you have to integrate. Let's start with Gaza, for example. I think annexing Judea and Samaria is a little bit more complex, but with Gaza, I have no interest in this idea that you have to integrate in 2 million people. I don't understand why Palestinians are the only people ever in history that get this like special status of refugee status. They're the only refugees in the world that get a own special organization. Every other refugees falls under the normal status of the UN, whereas UNRWA gets to handle the Palestinians, which was supposed to be a temporary organization, somehow becomes a 78-year, almost 78-year long organization now. Where I'm getting at is that Germans, and I'm not talking about Germans who recently occupied Poland after World War II. I'm talking about ones that were living there for hundreds and hundreds of years. Interesting enough, right after World War II, hundreds of thousands of them were displaced out of the area. Um, with the concept, I don't advocate for force, definitely not. I'm not advocating for forced ethnic cleansing. What I would say is open up the borders to Rafah, allow those that want to leave leave. I think some have already. Since October 7th, about 200,000 have left the Gaza Strip. Prior to October 7th, 40 to 45% of Gazans already expressed interest in leaving. They say 80 to 85% of them are already refugees. After that, what I would do is I would offer financial incentives and help people. A lot of people don't want to leave, not because they really love Gaza and they want to stay in. A lot of people don't want to leave because they don't have the financial means. So offer financial means and work with the surrounding Arab nations and Muslim nations. I have no interest in sending them necessarily to Europe. I'm talking about the surrounding Arab and Muslim nations, especially a lot of them. The most popular last name in Gaza is Al-Masri. It's from Egypt. I would work with them and tell them the United States and Israel tell the surrounding Arab nations the Middle East is not separated by Israel versus those that hate Israel. The Middle East is really separated by those that are backed by the IRGC and those that are against the IRGC. And that's just a fact. And so you tell the Arab states and the Muslim states around that want to see a new Middle East, especially ones that are lined up with the Abraham Accords, and you tell them what would you rather see? Would you rather see another IRGC proxy state and a continuation of forever war? Or would you rather, of course, they don't want to take in the Palestinians, they make it clear all the time, but what is the worst option? A continuous war with IRGC proxies and IRGC funding, or to take in people you say you don't want to take in. However, this will lead to a more prosperous Middle East and an IRGC being weakened to the point that they hopefully collapse, honestly. If you can convince them of that, then you can actually make deals to set up. There's two different types of people, in my opinion, in Gaza. There's those that legitimately do not, they may not love Israel, but they don't want this war. They don't support Hamas. They just want to send their kids to school. They just want to live their day-to-day lives. It's a win for them because Gaza is a hellhole for them in that sense. Then there's the second person, essentially the opposite, ones that find the cause, if you will, more important. If you can separate those that can leave even just because they need financial help and they're not worried about this Islamist resistance, it will be a lot easier to separate who are the extremists and who are the bad faith actors. From there, I think you can actually shorten the borders. But to wrap up the question, because I'm trying not to ramble too much, because I think I do have a plan, but it's a lot more complex than I can give in like 5 minutes. I understand the concern about keeping it a Jewish majority state. I've considered two options. I've considered the Emirates plan, and you guys can look at Dr. Mordechai Kader more for that information. He talks about it a lot. I think that's kind of interesting, and I do find the Arabs to be a lot more tribal, so I think a lot of them would actually be on board with that. If not the Emirates plan, I would consider a strategic push by starting with Area C and then later working with areas A and B. What I don't like is that people say, I don't know the answer for a one state solution, so therefore I'm just pro two-state solution. I think it's ridiculous. The two-state solution is effectively a continuation of the Oslo Accords and then a completion of it. The Oslo Accords have failed. It's just a fact of the matter. And so what I think when people say I'm pro two-state solution, what they're really saying is I want to just continue the status quo. Right now, the status quo is nothing more than continuous war, continuous killing on both sides, by the way. They attack Israel, Israel responds, and they die. And I just don't see how. What are we gonna do? We're just gonna keep passing the buck off to our children and our children's children?
My brother, the one thing that I don't see anybody bringing up is that if you go to any area, no matter where it is, you're gonna have a type of Red Dawn situation, or even worse, Vietnam, where you're going in and telling people, "We're gonna give you money to leave, but you need to leave," and they're not gonna leave. They're gonna booby trap the place, and you're gonna have constant war for another 20 years to try to get people out. So
Well, I
who
definitely
are
wouldn't
we?
advocate to go in and tell them to leave. That's not how I'm not saying, hey, you need to leave now. Here's $5,000 cash. No, that's not what I'm advocating for. I reject that none of them will leave. Like I said, already 200,000 have left the Gaza Strip
But
since
again, are
October
they
7th.
leaving because the place you call it a hellhole, but you're
Hmm.
saying because it's been overrun by bombs and militias that are terroristic, or is it because it's such a prime real estate that somebody needs to get it, and it better be a democratic state of Israel? Like the problem is it's very easy to uh, like decide what to do for other people, but there's people that and there's churches that have been there since 2000 years and stuff like that. So for it to be like it's up for grabs, what do you mean it's up for grabs? It's not up for grabs, according to whom? So you're saying that because it has become a terroristic state, it needs to be dismantled,
Well,
or
I don't think it's a
because
state at all. I don't think it's a state at all, and I reject this idea of it's up for grabs. When did it become Palestine? Like when was Gaza? Because you're arguing is like you're saying up for grabs as if it was a state, and now you're taking that state. When did Gaza ever become Palestine? Because if you look at the customary international law known as the UPJ principle, which is uti possidetis juris, when you look at that and you look at when Israel formed in May 14th, 1948, the UPJ principle, international law states that the borders will keep to the prior entity. That's what uti possidetis juris means. It means as it was. They did the same thing with Ukraine. They did the same thing with Azerbaijan. None of the borders changed when the Soviet Union fell. Even demographic shifts did not shift the borders because if you do that, it's a recipe for continuous conflict. And that's what the status quo of the two-state solution is right now because they're not solidifying borders. It always leads to continuous conflict. Ukraine, when it was created, Eastern Ukraine had so many Russians, but they didn't say, hey, there's a lot of Russians, so let's just change the borders so that way they stay in Russia. They didn't do that. So why is Israel treated worse than any other state? Israel, when it declared its establishment in 1948, would have been from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, of course, Egypt ends up occupying Gaza at the time, and Jordan illegally annexes Judea and Samaria, and it was only recognized by Pakistan and the UK. No international committee recognized Jordan's annexation. So, who did Jordan annex it from? They annexed it not from the British. The British already left. And not the Ottomans. They were gone. They annexed it from Israel. So, this idea that it was up for grabs, when did it leave the hands of Israel? Israel left in 2005, not because they gave it to them as a state.
you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, okay, all of it is Israel. We have all these Muslim Arabs, people who do not agree with an Israeli government, just like the Jews wouldn't agree with a Muslim government. So you have this large population of non-compliant Arabs. You have compliant Arabs in Nazareth in Jerusalem, or not
Well,
so
those are
compliant.
citizens.
Well, right. So if you said we gave citizenship to everyone,
I don't
and
agree with that.
now like that like so you're saying they have to go. It's like have to go like for whose benefit?
Well,
Like
it's up
that's
to
that's
them if they decide. So, okay, I understand your question now. So it depends. If they decide to accept citizenship, you can't force citizenship on them. Look at East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is a place where Israel offers citizenship to the Palestinians because they annexed East Jerusalem, and the overwhelming majority do not accept it because they see it as recognizing Israel. My argument is not to say, okay, we annex it like that. It's going to take one day. Overnight, we annex it. And then all of a sudden, we take 4 million Arabs and we give them all citizenship. No, that's a ridiculous plan. You offer this stuff in a gradual process, not overnight, not a quick, just like, oh, we're doing this right now. You offer the citizenship. If they don't want it, no hard feelings. but there's the door. There's three options that Arabs can choose in the land of Israel. And these are metaphorical options, and I'll explain them. Gaza, Nazareth, or Jordan. And those metaphors represent Gaza. No, let's start with Nazareth. Nazareth represents the Arabs who recognize Israel, are for the most part very compliant. They might have their issues with Israel, but they are still citizens of Israel and they want to see what's best. That's option one. And that's the best option. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see peace. I have no problem with Arabs, Muslims, Christians, Jews, whatever, living in the land. But the second option is Gaza. You can say, I reject you. I don't recognize you, and I'm going to fight you. You can die. You can be pushed out. You can be under the rubble. I don't like that option. Nobody likes that option. Nobody wants war. But if you're going to choose that option, of course, Israel will take the proper measures to defend herself, as she has every right to do. The third option is Jordan. Hey, I don't want to fight you, but I also don't really recognize you. Okay, fine. Then you can go. That is what I'm explaining. I do not believe in this idea of forcing citizenship on the people. They don't have to accept it. And that doesn't mean I think that they're bad people and they should die either. Unless they're option two, of course. If they want to take arms in a terroristic way and attack music festivals and rape and kill and burn, then okay, yeah, then I have no issue with them taking option two and Israel responding appropriately.
But let's say that they all down their arms and they all wanted to join Israel. Israel would never take them because then they would be outvoted, and then you would have Arab leaders instead of Jewish leaders. So this whole idea of we have to keep the majority Jewish population undermines the whole thing. Like if you say, okay, I want a one-state solution with only people that agree with me, with only people that want me to be their leader, that's when
Sure.
that's where the Palestinian movement says we're crying foul because now it's becoming dictatorial, it's becoming fascistic in a sense or militaristic, where it's like either you're under a boot and a
Sure.
limited amount, or you're not nowhere to be found. Like it just
So
doesn't make any sense.
well, one, your hypothetical is impossible. That's never what happened. So yeah, sure, I agree with you. If they all said, you know what, yes, we all accept it and we're all going to fight to like raise Israel, we'll take citizenship, we'll recognize Israel. Yeah, you're right. If they all did that, then that would happen, but that would literally never happen. So your hypothetical is it's just not based in reality. But that being said, let's say hypothetically they do. Okay, fine. There's a couple options you can do from there. You can do an Emirates plan. You don't have to do this idea of, well, what if they take majority, then they're going to vote us all out. You can do an Emirates plan, which is something that literally exists today, where Arab families and tribes have local autonomy with a Jewish control, which they can continue to say Arabs can serve in just like they do in the Knesset today, and therefore you could have an Arab majority but not lose control or protection for the Jewish people, and it can continue to be a Jewish state. So I don't think you would automatically just be like, oh, they're going to take majority and now they're going to vote us all out. There's multiple options that you can do from there. But again, there's no way they would all take citizenship anyway. So I don't think that would actually be reality. But hypothetically, if they did, there's options.
Okay, well, I appreciate at least you sound very reasonable because I always think that either we have a commonwealth where it's almost like reservations within a greater country,
Right.
or is the only solution that I see that most likely is going to happen, which is the worst solution, is for Israel to become a police state and to have everybody barricaded and they use the term concentration camps or whatever, but like pretty much like that
Yeah,
because
I don't
people
want that.
are so non-compliant or non-interested in any type of thing. So now, and I thought that's how it was. The way that it's painted by the pro-Palestinian community is that it was this militarized zone with satellites and lasers, and nobody can do anything. And then October 7th happens, and everybody's like, whatever happened to that? So I don't know if they were overshooting it on both sides, pretending that that was the case, or there was a huge neglect from the military on the Israeli side. Whatever happened, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So I know we're running out of time, but what do you think about the Trump and his friends idea that they can turn it into a paradise where the Palestinians work for the tourists and then everybody's happy and it's like the um, what do you call it? The Mediterranean coast for the world to enjoy.
I don't think he's actually going through with that. I think that was a tongue-in-cheek answer because Trump, he does this pretty well. I think he makes a lot of exaggerated statements on purpose to get people to kind of shift and do a fast react in one direction, which is generally closer to what he's actually looking for, or maybe not actually looking for, but actually wants to be in the realm of. However, to answer your question, I think that would be insane in the contemporary times. It's something that I would love to see if, like, let's say I can beat Thanos and snap my fingers. Hey, if I can beat Thanos and snap my fingers, I'd love for Muslims and Jews and everyone to live in peace. And I don't really care really who the majority is because they agree they're going to protect the Jewish people and it's always going to be a Jewish state. Even if they are a majority, they still love their Jewish population and they want to see Israel grow. That's what I'd love to see. But we just, like, again, reality versus what I want. But yeah, I'd love to see Gaza turn into this like pearl of the Middle East. It's beautiful, and the Palestinians are working and having economic growth instead of committing to terrorism and extremism, and the Israelis work on it. That would be amazing, but I just don't see it based in reality because the Palestinian people, especially in Gaza, I think are radicalized from birth. I think the people that were attacking on October 7th, the Nakba forces, if you do the math, those people were children when Gaza was showing the pioneers, Tomorrow's Pioneers, which was, you know what that is, the Farfood, the terrorist Mickey Mouse little kids show that they had where they teach them how to kill Jews and commit jihad, right? That show's no longer on air, but when it was on air, those kids are right at the age of the ones that did the October 7th attack. And even though that's not on air anymore, they still have stuff like Saplings of Jerusalem summer camp where they send hundreds of thousands of kids in Gaza. And when I say kids, I'm talking about from like 5, 6 years old all the way up to teenage years, teaching them how to kill Jews, IDF soldiers, weapons training. I think they're radicalized from the very beginning, and it's very sad. And I find it so interesting that the pro-Pally movement is consistently telling us, what about the children? What about the children? But they never gave any care about the children when it was mental abuse. So I don't think that would work out, Trump's plan.
Would you be willing to gift us another 15 minutes?
I can do 10 minutes.
Okay. So, in my research about anti-Semitism, as well as this idea that Zionism is evil, it's unjust, and it is undemocratic, what you see, and I was using mostly Israeli sources.
Hmm.
It was Shlomo Sands and a bunch of other people where they pull this idea that it's like a romanticized perspective on what it should be like. So it's kind of like you're saying, wishful thinking versus reality. So they're saying there should have never been a Zionist program because is against the three principles of the French Revolution. Um, there is no true equality, there's no true fraternity, and there's no true liberty because it's too Judeo-centric. If we really want to have a democratic country, is everybody's equal at all times for all reasons, and being Jewish doesn't matter. So someone who's Jewish and who knows about persecution, the first thing that you're going to say is like, so then what's the point of having a homeland for the Jews if you can't protect them and if you can't pursue Jewish survival? If being Jewish is inconsequential, then there won't be any Jews left. And then for us that believe that being Jewish is unique and special, then suddenly it's like we're just going to integrate so much that uh, you won't be killed for being Jewish, but nobody wants you to be Jewish to begin with. That's Shlomo Sand's perspective. And then he does the DNA stuff, and then he does they Judaized all of uh, former Palestine and stuff like that. So because of people like him, and then you have the Max Blumenthal's and all the modern uh, representatives of that. And I had a little conversation with Norman Finkelstein, and he wouldn't answer my questions because they were all logical questions. And then the more that I digged in, he's a Maoist. So for him, just like Mao, propaganda is more important than reality. Have you come across that the logic behind some of the leaders of um, the pro-Palestinian movement from the liberal Jewish perspective is a lot of fanciful rhetoric, a lot of sometimes they use like liberal Christian ideals that well, since we're all brothers in under God or whatever, who are we to say that the Jews have anything to contribute? It should just be this universal peoplehood, and having a Jewish state is offensive to that idea. Have you come across that?
Can't say I've come across that specifically. As for Shlomo Sand, the guy's been debunked in so many extensive amount of time. His DNA testing with the Khazar theory is absolutely nonsense. I mean, it's been debunked so many times. Again, just read the works of David Reich or any modern DNA study. It shows a cluster between the Sephardic, Mizrahi, and Ashkenazi Jews, not this idea that they are descendants of converts, especially knowing that Jews don't even do massive conversion, right? Post Sinai, it makes no sense. There's some studies that say it's possible that the royal family converted at most, but this idea that they are just like all converts is insane. Shlomo Sand uses selectively like outdated cited material. He minimizes contrary evidence. He overemphasizes political theory. So yeah, anyone that takes Shlomo Sand seriously is it's insane. The only thing he kind of got right, and even then he oversimplified, was he stated in his studies, I don't remember where, but I read it. He said that the Roman exile wasn't as he oversimplified it. He said there was no Roman exile really, or no major one. That's not true. However, it's true that many Jews did continue to remain even after the Roman exile. It's not like they kicked out every single Jew, but it's like, yeah, the guy's insane. He's been debunked more times than I can even possibly count. To answer your question, though, no, I haven't ran into anyone that's trying to be fair and say that. As for liberal Jews who are like as a Jews is what I call them, anti-Zionist Jews, whatever you want to say. This idea, and Shlomo Sand does this idea that if you just kind of assimilate and stop being Jewish, then you'll be okay, has also been debunked, even in just modern history. There are many Jews who assimilated, even their ancestors did before any major pogrom, the Holocaust. It didn't work out for them. The Reform movement was based on this ideology. It didn't work out for them at all. So I'm trying to figure out why we think, oh, it didn't work 50 years ago, 100 years ago, hundreds of years ago, but today in 2026, if we tried it one more time, it'll work. Um, I love who the Jewish people are. I love that they're a light among nations. I love the fact that 20 to 25% of Nobel Prize winners are Jewish, even though they only make up 0.2% of the population of the world. Why in the world would Jews want to stop being Jewish?
And just to, if you could clarify, the Islamic Revolution Guard Corps being, in a sense, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, all of them were working under that regime. I've never heard that before. I know that is true, but you threw it out, and I'm like, can you flush that out a little bit more?
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. So the IRGC has proxy groups, specifically with Hezbollah operating in the Western Hemisphere. You can actually look more into this through Operation Cassandra. They talk a lot about this. Argentina, Venezuela, Hezbollah operations, IRGC funds that go into drug smuggling and weapon smuggling operations to fund terrorism throughout the world. As for other groups, Hamas, PIJ, Houthis, Iraqi militia groups, some Syrian militia groups, all funded and perpetuated by the IRGC. The U.S. Treasury said hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons and training. It was actually a joint U.S.-UK operation, action, I should say. The Treasury stated that the IRGC QF supported and enabled Hamas and the PIJ, including the transfer of hundreds of millions of dollars, operational training. The U.S. Treasury and FinCEN, they specifically said that there was Iran-backed terrorist organizations and how money moves. The UK and the US actually found that the IRGC was actually bypassing a lot of sanctions by using cryptocurrency transfers from European sites. They would actually use this to bypass sanctions to continue to help fund their terrorist organizations and regimes. The U.S. State Department has done reports on Iran's uses of the IRGC as a mechanism for proxy support. UN reporting, if you want to go beyond just like U.S. and UK and Western, UN reporting in major media talks about specifically Houthi capabilities depending on the IRGC support. So I can go on and on, but the point is that the IRGC was smart enough to stop doing so much direct attacks like they did right after in 1979 after the revolution when they literally kidnapped Americans. They were very directly involved in the Beirut bombing later in the 80s, I believe that was, right? That killed over 240 Americans. They started to utilize more proxy warfare so that way they can have some sense of plausible deniability. This is why I find it insane when people are like, why should America get involved with Iran? It didn't do anything to us. They're consistently doing stuff to us. Just because we have been a step ahead of them and stopping them, especially here in the Western Hemisphere and their proxies like Hezbollah, does not mean that Iran has not been attacking us since 1979.
And last question, I know it's a lot to ask, but KGB. No one ever talks about the KGB being involved with Yasser Arafat and
And Mahmoud
Mubarak.
Abbas.
Yes. So why that gets skipped? Maybe because they're communists and they support that kind of stuff. What I know that Israel was having a hard time getting support from anybody when they were fighting the different wars. Why is do you see any Russian involvement in the current anti-Semitic stuff that is becoming popular?
Not as much as it used to be. There was something called Operation SIG. Um, really going into the early 60s into the PLO, which was founded in 1964. Like you said, Yasser Arafat. Both Yasser Arafat and Mahmoud Abbas were literally KGB agents. Mahmoud Abbas has a code name. We get a lot of this information from the biggest defector, Jan Pas. Hold on, let me get his name actually. I always mess it up because it's like some Russian name.
And Nick is like an encyclopedia. He's
Yeah,
really good at
Pasepa.
debating people with all this stuff. We didn't even talk about your Charlie Kirk style debates online and with other platforms. Maybe you can come back later and tell us how that experience has been like.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it is Pasepa. I just wanted to make sure I didn't want to give you guys the wrong name. But yeah, he was the highest ranking defector from the former Eastern Bloc. And so we get I know there's other people we get information from, but a lot of it's from him. Stalin, who literally coined the term disinformation, separate from misinformation. Disinformation is like a purposeful, strategic misinformation, if you will. And so they're the ones that actually started a lot of the anti-Semitism in the Middle East. They started off by taking the Protocols of Elders of Zion, literally a plagiarized book that is just filled with just anti-Semitism. Really, it doesn't matter. If you guys don't know it by now, just look it up. He took that, translated it. They took that, translated it to Arabic, and spread it throughout the Arab world. That was step one. They increased anti-Semitism. They actually trained Yasser Arafat to stop talking about jihadism so much and actually use media against Israel and use the words of the West. And he would tell them, instead of saying jihadists, say you're fighting for human rights. Um, Holocaust denial. They literally just, if you want to know more, I mean, I could do a 5 hour long episode on Operation SIG, but just go look it up. It's called Operation SIG, SIG, literally is the Russian word. Well, it's shortened, but it's the Russian word for Zionist governments. It's called Operation SIG. It goes on and on and on about everything you hear today, the claim of apartheid, the claim of open air prisons, genocide, like all the buzzwords you hear today literally started with Operation SIG. Do I find it as prominent today as it was back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s? Not as much, but it set the stone it set the base and the foundation for what we see today with Qatar. Qatar is doing exactly what the USSR did. They are targeting the university systems, which is exactly what the USSR did. Because if you want to change the minds of people, whether it's to become more anti-Israel or whatever the case you want, always target the dumbest adults. Who are the dumbest adults? They're the newest adults. So target the college kids. Always, always, always target the college kids. That is the way to change a population. You've seen this from old Asian empires who literally would brainwash college kids to do their bidding. And you see it with Russia, and you're seeing it with Qatar today.
Well, we want to thank you so much for your time and for you sharing these resources. We appreciate your honesty and authenticity, and we hope that you stay safe. And I wouldn't be able to handle a lot of internet hatred and stuff like that because it starts messing with your sense of safety. So, whatever prayers for you to stay peaceful and not let it get to you. And we want to again thank you for making time for us.
Thank you so much. God bless. I appreciate it.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.